Who said he's not ruling out the possibility of running for a third term, saying, I'm not joking, there are methods which you could do it with. How? And reporters asked him more about it later on Air Force One. Take a look.
You said you were not joking about a third term, about possibly wanting a third term. Does that mean you're not planning to leave office on January 20th?
I'm not looking at that, but I'll tell you, I have had more people ask me to have a third term, which is in a way a fourth term, because the other election, the 2020 election was totally rigged.
The Constitution limits a president to 2 terms. Is it your understanding that they have to be?
I don't even want to talk about it. I'm just telling you, I have had more people say, please run again. They said, we have a long way to go before we even think about that.
Welcome back to AllStarBuzz. Thank you for joining us. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Now, let's begin.
Is he actually planning on this, or is this just another way to take the headlines away from all the other messes his administration is actually dealing with right now?
You know, I actually think that he is so enamored of Putin and so enamored with power that he wouldn't mind being king, you know, with the crooked crown. I don't know that it's something that can ever be accomplished, because we know that FDR historically had 4 terms. And so they ratified the 22nd Amendment in 1951, making sure that a president could only run 2 terms, consecutively or non-consecutively. So in order to really legally do this, he would probably have to change the 22nd Amendment, and that you would need like 34 states, 3/4 states to ratify that. So I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's not going to try.
Yeah.
Well, look, you know, no matter how insane, stupid, harebrained, and lawless I think some he says might be, I have learned the lesson of taking him seriously.
Yes.
But what was interesting is this was a hot topic for all of us, and none of us picked it this morning because we're all on to him. He is the distractor in chief. And so he doesn't want us to keep talking about Signalgate, which is a real threat to national security, and every day revealed that show us how incompetent and reckless his national security team is. He doesn't want us to talk about the way he is tanking the stock market with his imbecilic tariffs. What he's calling Liberation Day should be called Hypertension Day, because it's going to give us all a heart attack. He doesn't want us to talk about Andre, the 30-year-old gay hairdresser, Venezuelan, who due process just because he had a tattoo that said mom with a crown and dad with a crown, was grabbed and disappeared to the hellhole in El Salvador. He doesn't want us to be talking about those things. And he wants us to be talking about this.
It all started with a segment on The View that, once again, had viewers divided. The panel was discussing Donald Trump's possible return for a 3rd term, and as always, the discussion quickly turned heated. But what really caught attention wasn't just the topicit, was the way the audience reacted. As Whoopi Goldberg and her co-hosts cracked jokes and took jabs, the crowd responded with synchronized laughter and applause that felt more rehearsed than real. There was a growing sense that this wasn't just a discussion, it was performance. It left many wondering if the audience was being cued to react, more like a live studio prop than a group of genuine viewers.
I don't think he likes that behind closed doors, supposedly, J.D. Vance and some others called for Waltz to be removed due to this action. They also have some new reporting coming out in the Wall Street Journal today that there were more conversations that were potentially confidential happening on this Signal app. So I do think the distraction is big, but I would also, just one thing before any attempt at rewriting our Constitution would be the local elections that happen before then. And so It's easy to kind of be distracted by what he throws out there, but there are some really pivotal elections happening. And
what do you mean?
One of the reasons they pulled Elise Stefanik's name out is there was going to be a delay in her seat, and they didn't want to lose the House. So there's stuff happening on the ground, and Republicans have proven to be ahead of that. They're more of chess players. So I would make sure that Democrats don't get distracted by the crazy, and they keep their eyes on the ground, the local elections that really change things.
I will say, shout out to Louise.
The segment wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about how the show frames the conversation, often by picking the most polarizing subjects and adding fuel to the fire. The View's long-standing tactic of putting Trump front and center in their narratives once again showed how even a simple mention of his name can dominate headlines and stir controversy.
Louisiana, shout out to Louisiana, because Louisiana had a special election this weekend, and all 4 of these proposed amendments died there. And so Louisiana came out, the Black community really came out, 37% early voting. Shout out to Cliff Albright for organizing on the ground there. So I think Sarah's right. The local elections are really where it's at right now.
Well, I think everybody's aware. God knows they've been given enough information of what to do, but you haven't said anything.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the 22nd Amendment is no joke, and even if you somehow were to bypass the constitutional process and try to run again, there's just no evidence I see that Donald Trump is going to leave in 4 years at 82, so popular that the public's like, never mind, let's keep him another 4 years. Yeah. That's just not what we do in America. We tend to be change elections in a change electorate, but I do think that he's got this way of dangling things like this out there like catnip so that certain corners of the media bite on it and they cover it. And I saw this leading a lot of networks today. Yeah. Instead of the fact that in 48 hours, tariffs are going to go into effect that are going to cost all of us a lot of money. Pull up. This is Fox News. 69% of Americans believe that tariffs are going to make the cost of goods more expensive. A plurality of economists, left, right, and center agree. It is really a small fringe minority that says this is going to bring down consumer costs. Yeah. And that's what he was elected on. He was not elected to take Greenland. He was not elected to take Canada and make it the 51st state. It was to bring down the cost of living because everything's too expensive for Americans. So if he keeps going the way he is, I don't think we even have to worry about this because I don't think people are going to be interested in a further time. But I think if I'm J.D. Vance, who thinks, oh, I'm the heir apparent, I'm going to be the next Republican presidential candidate, I'd be like, oh, this is a little insulting. Like, he's just, he is not teeing it up for me. He's giving me the worst job to do.
You guys remember when Republicans...
And that's exactly how they keep their relevance, by keeping the focus on drama, not dialogue. But beyond the staged laughter and familiar Trump jabs, there's a deeper pattern playing out. The show doesn't just spotlight Trump for ratings, it uses him to shape the entire political narrative.
At 82, Joe Biden was too old to run.
Yeah.
I mean, because, you know, when we look at Donald Trump, we all think picture of great health. He really is going to be doing great at 82. He's actually going to be older than Joe Biden. He's going to be the oldest president at 82 and 7 months when he leaves office than anybody else. And I don't understand how anybody graduated from Wharton Business School and thinks that tariffs are paid by the foreign country. No, you idiot. They are paid by consumers, by Americans buying things.
Again, I've been saying this for a while. I'm going to say it again. Do not wait for the politicians to get themselves together. It is up to us. Get out there and vote. You don't like what's happening? Then stop what's happening. Stop it. Get out there and stop it. You know? Everybody says, oh, I feel so helpless. Well, you're not helpless. Yeah. You're not helpless. There's a woman I read about this morning whose school decided they were no longer going to teach Black history. She decided that wasn't a good idea, so she is teaching Black history on Saturdays at the library.
Oh. The truth is, whether people love or hate him, his name guarantees attention. And that's the point. With every mention, the audience is pulled into a loop of outrage and loyalty, where facts often take a back seat to feelings. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all the criticism and controversy, there's a growing number of everyday Americans who are starting to change their minds. People who never voted for Trump before people who even criticized him are now saying they miss his leadership. It's not just about slogans or rallies anymore, it's about real-life experiences. High grocery bills, skyrocketing gas prices, and economic stress are making some reflect on the past with new eyes. Many are admitting that during Trump's presidency, they felt more financially secure. It's this shift that mainstream shows often ignore. While The View cracks jokes, real people are having real conversations about what leadership meant to them. And that gap between TV talk and daily life? It's only getting wider. And that gap becomes even more obvious when you look at how The View handles its own values. The same people who preach about kindness, unity, and respectful discourse are often the first to throw insults. During the segment, one of the hosts openly called Trump stupid and an idiot, words that go directly against the very message of civil conversation they claim to support. It's not just political critique anymore, it's personal attacks dressed up as commentary. That kind of hypocrisy doesn't go unnoticed. People are tired of the double standard show. Some voices are protected while others are ridiculed for saying the exact same thing. It's one thing to disagree politically, it's another to abandon decency when it suits the narrative. And that's exactly what's happening. Many viewers are beginning to feel that shows like The View aren't promoting discussion, they're enforcing division. When your entire argument is built on shutting the other side down, are you really standing for anything? Or are you just trying to win the argument by being the loudest in the room? The truth is, name-calling and moral superiority don't make the message stronger, they just reveal how weak the foundation really is. That weak foundation really starts to crack when you dig into topics like immigration and crime subjects that are deeply personal for many Americans. During the segment, one of the co-hosts defended individuals who had been deported, despite their known ties to gangs and criminal activity. For many viewers, this crossed a line. It wasn't just political disagreement, it felt like a dismissal of real concerns happening in communities across the country. Trump, for all his flaws, built a platform on tackling issues like immigration and law enforcement head-on. Whether you agreed with his approach or not, it resonated with people who were tired of feeling unsafe or unheard. That's why, even years later, these same topics remain central to national debate. While mainstream media outlets mock or downplay them, everyday citizens are still dealing with the consequences. And that disconnect is dangerous. When people feel like their fears and frustrations are being ignored or worse, laughed at, they begin to tune out traditional platforms altogether. What remains is a widening divide between media narratives and lived experiences. Immigration and crime aren't just buzzwords, they're real issues affecting real lives. And no amount of late-night mockery or roundtable banter can erase that. That's why so many people keep pointing back to the same three things Trump emphasized throughout his campaign: immigration, inflation, and crime. These weren't just political talking points, they were issues millions of Americans felt in their daily lives. Rising costs, neighborhoods feeling less safe, and frustration with a system that seemed more focused on headlines than solutions, it all added up. And while critics hammered Trump for his tone or tactics, his messaging hit home for a lot of people. Fast forward to today, and those same issues haven't gone away. In fact, many would argue they've gotten worse. Grocery prices are up, rent is out of control, and cities are dealing with crime spikes that feel like they're barely being addressed. Yet, shows like The View spend more time dragging Trump than they do discussing actual solutions. They put up graphs, toss around statistics, and claim to know what's best, but they rarely talk about what's really happening on the ground. And that's why people are still listening to Trump. Not because he's perfect, but because he talks about the things others won't. For many Americans, he represents the only person who acknowledged their struggles while everyone else was too busy laughing on camera. And while The View and others focus on mocking or dismissing Trump, there's a serious issue they're ignoring: the lack of strong leadership within the Democratic Party. Even the hosts themselves seem unsure about who's actually in charge. There are constant debates over who should be the face of the party, yet no clear answer. That uncertainty trickles down, making voters feel even more disconnected. When asked tough questions, many Democratic leaders dodge or deflect. Press conferences feel more like performances than honest conversations. Meanwhile, Republican figures love them or hate the mayor, at least showing up with bold, direct messages. It's one reason Trump continues to stand out: his confidence, his presence, his willingness to address the uncomfortable. Even if you disagreed with him, you knew exactly where he stood. People don't want perfect, they want real. They want someone who speaks plainly, who owns their opinions, and who shows some kind of direction. In a time when so many feel like the country is off track, the absence of clear Democratic leadership is glaring. And for a growing number of Americans, that absence is exactly why they're willing to give Trump another shot, even if it means challenging the very system that tries to shut him out. This disconnect becomes even more noticeable when discussions around race and identity enter the conversation. One particular moment from The View highlighted this perfectly when one of the hosts praised a woman for teaching Black history on Saturdays at a library after her local school allegedly removed it from the curriculum. On the surface, it sounded noble, but for some viewers, it raised a bigger question: why is history being divided at all? Instead of focusing on unity through shared knowledge, the narrative often becomes about separating communities' Black history, white history, Asian history, turning education into a checklist of categories rather than a cohesive story. And that division isn't just happening in textbooks, it's playing out in real time across the country. People are growing tired of being boxed in, labeled, and pitted against each other. Many believe schools should teach history in full accurately and inclusively, but without fueling division. The goal should be understanding, not identity politics. Real education should empower students with life skills and context, not just cultural sound bites. That's why some parents are choosing to homeschool their kids, not out of ignorance, but because they want education to be grounded in reality, not ideology. And that frustration is spreading fast. That frustration isn't just about what's being taught, it's also about what's not being taught. A growing number of parents feel that while schools are spending time on social narratives and identity-focused lessons, they're failing to prepare kids for real life. Simple but essential skills like how to manage money, understand credit, or write a check are often left out of the classroom entirely. This disconnect between academic priorities and practical knowledge is pushing families to rethink the role of education altogether. It's no longer just about grades or graduation, it's about whether schools are equipping kids to succeed beyond the classroom. And when parents see curriculums filled with ideology but lacking tools for adulthood, they start asking hard questions. Why are we arguing over which history to prioritize when students can't balance a budget? Why is there more focus on political correctness than preparing the next generation to navigate the real world? These aren't just complaints, they're the reasons behind a shift in how families approach education. It's not about rejecting diversity or ignoring history. It's about demanding that schools deliver real value. Because at the end of the day, what good is a diploma if you're unprepared for life after the final bell? And that's why many parents are taking matters into their own hands. Homeschooling is on the rise not just because of concerns over curriculum, but because of a broader belief that schools are no longer aligned with the values or priorities of everyday families. It's not about isolating kids from society, it's about protecting them from what many see as unnecessary distractions, division, and indoctrination. When classrooms are focused more on pushing social agendas than teaching essential knowledge, people start looking for alternatives. Parents want their children to grow up with a well-rounded view of the world, but also with the tools to thrive in it. And in households across the country, families are having these conversations quietly, stepping away from the system and building something they trust. It's not just about education, it's about influence. Who gets to shape your child's view of the world? Who decides what's important and what's not? For many parents, that responsibility can't be left in the hands of strangers. So they're stepping up, creating environments where their kids can learn math, science, history, and how to think critically without the noise. That's not rebellion, that's responsibility. And more people are realizing it every day. And when you look at what's driving that shift, it's not just about school sits, about the broader media culture that continues to fuel division instead of solutions. Shows like The View thrive on outrage, soundbites, and selective narratives. They showcase graphs, polls, and stats when it suits their agenda, but ignore or downplay facts that don't align with their message. It's become less about informing the public and more about reinforcing a point of view. Take tariffs, for example. While economists across the board might raise concerns, people on the ground remember what life was like during Trump's term. Gas was cheaper, groceries were manageable, and for many, there was a sense of control over their financial lives. Whether or not the policies were perfect, the perception of stability was real. And that perception matters more to voters than pie charts on daytime TV. When pundits on national platforms laugh off real concerns, it sends a clear message. Your experience doesn't matter unless it fits their narrative. That's why so many people tune out the noise and tune into their lived reality. And in that reality, things like inflation and immigration aren't debates, they're daily struggles. Struggles that demand more than just talking points. That's exactly why, for so many Americans, Trump's message still sticks. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. While others are busy playing political chess, he's speaking directly to the issues that hit home: jobs, prices, safety, and national pride. And whether people agree with him or not, there's no denying he knows how to connect with a frustrated, overlooked public. Meanwhile, the media keeps asking why his supporters stay loyal. The answer is simple: they feel heard. In a world where inflation eats away at paychecks, crime rattles neighborhoods, and border concerns are brushed aside, Trump's direct and unapologetic approach offers a sense of control of somebody doing something. That's more reassuring to many than polished speeches filled with promises that never quite deliver. Critics can call it blind loyalty or stubbornness, but what they miss is the emotional connection. Trump doesn't just present policies, she presents a fight for the people who feel ignored by the system. And in today's climate, that fight resonates, especially when every other voice seems more concerned with image than impact. It's not about politics anymore, it's about survival, dignity, and feeling like someone's finally on your side. And as the conversation keeps circling back to age and fitness for office, The View and similar platforms love to bring up how old Trump would be in a second term 82. But they conveniently forget that Joe Biden is already there. The same people who once claimed Biden's age wasn't an issue now suggest Trump would be too old to lead. It's another example of how political talking points shift depending on who they're aimed at. But for most voters, it's not really about the number, it's about energy, presence, and clarity. People aren't comparing birth dates, they're comparing performances. And the reality is, many Americans don't see Biden as sharp or capable in the way a president should be. From public stumbles to moments of forgetfulness, concerns about Biden's health are not just partisan noise, they're genuine worries shared across party lines. Meanwhile, Trump, despite being close in age projects, strength, energy, and defiance. Whether that's real or simply branding, it plays well with those who want to feel confident in their leadership. So when The View rolls out the age argument, it comes off as hollow, even petty. Because voters are watching more than numbers, they're watching who can still lead from the front. And all of this, the media games, the political bias, the selective outrage, comes to a head when basic truths are ignored in favor of catchy insults. One host on The View mocked Trump for not understanding how tariffs work, calling him an idiot for thinking foreign countries pay them. But here's the thing. For the average American struggling to afford groceries, the debate over economic theory doesn't matter as much as how things felt under a different administration. Trump's policies, like them or not, gave people a sense of control over their finances. They could fill their tanks, stock their fridges, and make ends meet. So when pundits wave around expert opinions and graphs but refuse to acknowledge lived reality, they lose credibility. The personal attacks just make it worse. You can't call for civility while constantly tearing someone down. It doesn't work like that. And that's where so many media outlets fail. Instead of listening to what people are actually saying, they double down on mockery, assuming anyone who disagrees is just uninformed. But that's not true. People are informed. They're informed by experience. And no flashy debate or clever insult is going to change what they've seen, lived, and felt firsthand. So, when one of the hosts closed the segment by encouraging people to vote if they're unhappy, that part actually struck a chord. Because despite all the noise, all the division, and all the back and forth, she was right about one thing. Change starts with action. People are fed up. They're tired of the games, the finger-pointing, and the endless media spin. And more than ever, they're realizing they have the power to push back, not just with opinions, but with their vote. But even then, The View couldn't help but pivot into a moment that sparked even more controversy. They praised a woman for teaching Black history at a library after it was removed from schools. And while that might sound admirable, it opened a larger conversation about what should be taught in classrooms and what's being left out. People are asking, where's the financial literacy? Where's the real-world prep? Instead of constant focus on identity and division, why aren't we equipping kids with the tools they'll actually need in life? Because at the end of the day, the root of all this isn't Trump, Biden, or any politician, it's disconnection between institutions and the people they're supposed to serve, between media and reality. And unless that changes, don't be surprised if more Americans start tuning out and stepping up. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.